So what I'm going to be talking about today is what I have learned over the last month to 6 weeks about the difference between soft skills and hard skills, particularly what I've learned by looking at the Student Opinion Survey, which is a survey that the whole SUNY system does every 3 years, and we did it in spring of 2018. I'm also going to be talking about some data out of the National Survey of Student Engagement that came out in the spring of 17. Starting off, we're going to be looking at this SOS data. Back in the fall, I did a set of presentations to student support staff and to faculty, and the faculty presentation in particular really focused on these learning outcomes. These are self-assessed, where the students are asked, how much has your experience at SUNY Oswego contributed to your blank? And then there are 15 different things that fill in that blank. Students rate the size of our contribution from nothing at all, or losers, to very large. Most of the results presented here are just from juniors and seniors, so we're looking at sort of the summative, everything we've done for them. But in other cases, it'll be noted. I've done some stuff with lower level and upper level, so that lower level would be freshman and sophomore results. The averages for SUNY Oswego range from 3.4 to 4.0 on these scales that go up to 5. They are very, very good. We're going to be looking at some graphs that are going to make some areas of the campus look weaker than others. Even the floor of our students' experience is very, very good. So we are splitting hairs at some sense. When the origins of today's presentation, for today's research, which I'm now presenting to you, is that when I was mucking around with those 15 scores, I did some stuff to see if I could reduce the total number of variables I was looking at into some sort of larger overarching patterns or sets of patterns. And in a statistical sense, I was playing around with some factor analysis. And I presented this graph to the faculty, and I said, you know, it sort of is just a segue. As I was playing with these things, I did some factor analyses, and I did several different types. These are very robust results in the sense that the variables that are highly correlated with each other remain highly correlated with each other, more so than the other set of variables. So I mentioned the faculty. It's kind of interesting because it looks like we have these two kind of distinct kinds of learning going on. And the bluer sort of green ones over the top all look to me like things that people sometimes talk about as soft skills, while the ones on the bottom in the pink, it seems like a factor related to more of what we would think as hard skills. So I just spit this out to the faculty. I've heard people talk about soft skills versus hard skills, and I had a general conversational understanding of what that was. A faculty member followed up on that question and said, well, that he thought this was very interesting, or she, I don't remember the exact person, thought that was very interesting and would like to know more about where these soft skills are developed and where the hard skills are developed. So I said, I too would be interested in that. So I started off asking myself, is hard versus soft skills really just some sort of weird PR stunt, just a way of talking about things people do? Or is it a useful data reduction scheme? So I did just a little bit of research looking at literally hard skills and soft skills out on Google. I did not read any books about this. I'm not a learning scholar, but I wanted to learn a little bit more about how people talk about what we mean when we say hard skills and what we mean when we say soft skills. So these are the 3 places that I poked around in. And let me read to you some of the descriptions that I came up with. Out of the balanced careers group, hard skills are teachable abilities or skill sets that are easier to quantify. All soft skills are also known as people skills or interpersonal skills. Typically, students learn hard skills in the classroom through books or through other training materials or on the job. Unlike hard skills, it's hard to point to specific evidence that you possess a soft skill. When I read that, I found myself thinking about back when I was applying for jobs, a year or so ago. It's very common for job descriptions to say you have to have a good sense of humor. Mm-hmm. I think, what do you say? It's like, I'm a funny girl. How do you prove you have a good sense of humor? It's a very hard thing to point to specific evidence. People laugh at me a lot,
I may have asked them to tell me a joke when they said one of their strengths was they're funny. I said, "Oh, tell me a joke." It just came out. And when they were on the spot, they're like, "What? I will. Do you want me to?"
I know. Well, and having a good sense of humor really isn't about telling jokes. No. It's not being a stand-up comic. Another group, Investopia, I've really thought this was really interesting. Possessing strong hard skills often requires the left brain or logic center, or strengthen the left brain. In contrast, strong soft skills are typically formed in the right brain or the emotional center. Hard skills involve rules that remain the same regardless of what business or circumstances a person is in at any given time. So hard skills are the data analytics skills that I possess that enabled me to go and produce some value, I hope, for Oswego Health. Completely different industry, but I know how to work through gigantic spreadsheets and melt them down into little graphs that reveal patterns. Conversely, soft skills involve rules that change depending on the company culture and on colleagues' expectations. So these soft skills require flexibility and empathy, so that you can figure out if you're actually connecting with the other person coming from that different culture or different background. AAC&U writes about intellectual and practical skills that are practiced extensively across the curriculum, and about personal and social responsibility, which is anchored through involvement with diverse communities and real-world challenges. So the AAC&U stuff is not so much hard skill, soft skill, but it still seems to get at some of this dimension of things that you can learn in a classroom and things that you really don't know that you know how to do until you get out of the classroom and interact with other people in an applied setting. When I started trying to think about this data, specifically thinking about these 15 measures that I had, I can't tell you how many nights I laid in bed trying to figure out which bucket to put each of these 15 in. And I finally concluded they don't all go in one of these buckets. Not everything is just a hard skill or just a soft skill. In my brain, I kind of decided that I think there's 2 dimensions that are slicing out 4 different kinds of skills. The hard skills that I'm going to be talking about today, that I'm going to be using out of SOS, are really sort of in this upper right-hand corner. Skills that students have that they look at and say, I'm ready to go and do that career. I know how to do accounting. I know how to manage a classroom. I know how to perform on the GRE in order to get into the graduate school that I want to get into in the field. I have that body of information and knowledge. So those are very specific skills that probably are learned through the curriculum. General education skills, writing, speaking, and one of the other 15 in the SOS is technology skills with technology. These are skills that when we analyze them on those factor scales, they kind of end up everywhere. It's like, well, that would make sense if they're general. They're infused throughout the major, and they're very holistic. They're not specific and applied. They're necessary everywhere. The soft skills that I'm eventually going to be measuring are items that I put in this bottom left quadrant. They deal with personal growth, working in diverse settings with people that come from diverse backgrounds, different from your own, feeling a sense of leadership, understanding how you function as a leader, and your interpersonal skills. If the specific informational skills are taught in the curriculum, many of these soft skills are strengthened through co-curricular experiences, getting out of the classroom, or maybe through the curriculum, but not literally in the classroom usually. So, and then in the right-hand side are applied experiences, really like an internship would be over there. And I'm not gonna touch much about that. That's where it all comes together. So the hard skills in SOS, I took the 15, I said, well, I want to pick out a few that seem most accurately described as abilities that a student would associate with the skills that they acquired through their major. Because I majored in this, I know how to do this. So these are the 5 items that I decided to focus on. So students rated, do I have the knowledge and skills needed for a career? Do I, or how much has Oswego contributed to knowledge and skills required for further academic study, graduate school? Analytic thinking skills seems to be something that people think about in connection to their major. When you say, do you have good analytic skills? They think about, well, what have I learned in my major? What can I really do? What have I analyzed? Knowledge and skills needed for intellectual growth, and skills used to acquire information, ideas, and concepts. So these are the 5 from the core of that first factor analysis. I packaged them, just smushed them together, added them all up. It's a simple additive measure. They are highly correlated, so it's statistically, it's a good additive scale. It ranges from a low of 5 for a person that said, none, 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 none. This university hasn't taught me any of this stuff. And we only had a few of those. All the way up to 25, a person who says, this university has contributed very much to my ability to do all of these 5 things. The mean is just under 20 and the standard deviation is about 4. And you can really see that the mode there is a 20, which would be people who sat down and gave everything a 4. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who did exactly that. So we can't make too much out of this data. After all, it's self-reported and it's kids, but not like
it does
not
show
like
that
baby.
those things are related.
Yes. Yes.
So they felt the same across the board on.
Yes.
They looked at it the same way.
Yep.
Are there questions in that survey that say, for this one, choose number 2, so that way you can kind of pull that out for people to just go through and do 444? What do they call that? Reliability.
Like, does the survey come back with a measure of the likelihood that the person
Yeah, so
didn't
some surveys
actually
throw
take
a
it?
couple questions in there just to make sure that they're not going through.
Yes,
Yeah,
actually
Jim
there are.
Ashford's type of
Yeah.
negative or inverse.
They do. Not in this panel of items, but in 2 or 3 of the other panels of items, there is one item that's flipped and that would be reversed. But I haven't looked at that. That's a very, very, very good point, because that would be a flag that somebody didn't take very much time doing it. What I've done in this graph is the question that the faculty member brought up at the presentation earlier in the fall was, where are soft skills being acquired at a higher rate? Where are hard skills, or is it all the same? There are some differences. Now I want you to remember that all of these averages are quite high. But we have enough students that there are some significant differences here. And in many cases, significant differences are good. The kind of learning that happens in a school of education really should be characteristically different than the kind of learning that's happening in an engineering program. There should be some differences. The problem happens when we don't understand what the differences are, or if they really surprise us. So each college does have a unique pattern. Well, let me describe the graph a little bit. So this is the average of the hard skills scale. Remember, the overall average is about 20. I've just scaled it from 15 to 22 because all the averages are really, really high. And if we went all the way down to 1 or 5, would be the lowest, we wouldn't be able to really see much of these differences. I looked at lower level and upper level. I originally anticipated that everybody's pattern would look sort of like class. That the lower level students would say, well, I'm learning a little bit about these things. And the upper level students would say, yes, we've mastered it all. Class is the only one that actually has that pattern.
Gets worse with SCMA.
SCMA, when I showed this to the provost, he said 2 things. One is don't show that graph because it makes business look bad. And then he was like, well, what's going on with SCMA? That SCMA, what the graph says is that the upper level students in SCMA, which is the arts and communication, perceive that they have mastered a lower level of hard skills than the lower level students. I know in the arts, oftentimes arts curriculum are almost flipped. That there is a ton of very applied stuff. Like if you're in fine arts, they have to take those tool classes right up front. And many of their classes are very sequenced, so they have to do the 100, and then they have to do the 201, and then the 301. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if students in art, music, and theater do feel like they're getting pounded on major specific facts and knowledge right up front. I mean, the music students, right off the bat, one of their biggest struggles is they have to get through music theory, which is a killer course. Whereas in the arts and sciences, we're like, oh, take all your gen eds, we'll get to the major later. So it didn't completely surprise me what I saw here. The second thing I'll tell you is that eventually, in this presentation, I'm going to present a graph related to hard skills for just the communication major, and this pattern that we see here is not replicated. So what's going on here with this decline in the upper level may be just specific to this set of students and this set of questions. It may not be a really generalizable issue. It is the biggest difference on here that is concerning to me on the hard skills scale is the difference between business and education. I would have expected business to be higher. I'm naive, sort of, but I took a bunch of business classes and it seemed very, like, here, this is how you balance, this is a balance sheet. This is it's very definitional. And
It was surprising because I was a business student and I would have expected the upper to go up because you don't start taking, even Management 261 stuff till sophomore year. Yeah. And then you're taking most of your business classes, junior, senior year, your accounting and your finance and stuff.
So I wanted to look at some group-based differences that might explain some of this, because I know the set of students taking business is very different from the set of students taking education. So first of all, I looked at gender. Business is definitely significantly more male, many more male students, but that does not explain any of these differences between these 2 areas. In this sample, business is more racially and ethnically diverse than education. And that does explain part of the gap in that the non-white School of Education students have slightly lower hard skills scales than the non-white business students, which is fascinating and not great. But it's really among the white students that the School of Education's average is being elevated above business.
So in the context of business, perhaps, if you're in accounting or finance, my assumption would be then you can articulate those hard skills you are gaining because of the type of courses you take. Yeah. But if majority of the students in school of business are in business administration, if you're in business administration, you have a lot more leeway on the kind of courses you take. You do take accounting 1 and 2,
Yeah.
but the upper division courses, the variations on what you could do is pretty substantial, and you might not have to take hardly any of those
Right.
hard skill courses that the accounting students have to take.
Right.
But you probably don't have enough numbers of these subgroups to delineate.
One of the biggest problems with the SOS survey is that it does not parse students down to the major. It only takes them to the college, which is why I went to the NESI, and we will get there. But
the other thing that is interesting, School of Business, did you see how many of those were international students in the diversity too?
They are rolled up as diverse students, which is part of the reason why they are more diverse.
They would see students that are international are less likely to get an education major than a
Yeah.
business major.
Yeah. And that's part of that difference.
School of Ed's also required to do practicum student teaching for most of the majors too. So.
Because I was so confused about business and education, I went back into the data and I looked at some of the other variables to see how they correlated with this hard skills scale. So I found several items that have really pretty strong correlations with hard skills scale. And then I looked to see if business and education differ on these. One of the biggest concerns that has been raised in connection with my work on the SOS with business is that the class size in the business program is much, much larger than in the School of Education. So, the correlation between class sizes and mastering hard skill scale is a 0.44. That's not to be sneezed at. That's a pretty good correlation. The average for business is a 4.22. The average for the School of Education, their average satisfaction with class size is 4.39. That those values to the far right-hand side are measuring whether or not that difference between 4.22 and 4.39 is big enough. Is that big enough for us to say, that could be a problem? And it is a little bit of a problem. These students in business are somewhat aware that their classes are bigger, and they're somewhat less satisfied about that. They are also less satisfied with these other measures that are highly correlated with hard skills scale. Frequency of intellectual stimulation, frequency of engaging professors, satisfaction with instruction overall. I went in and I ran a model looking to see what happens to the hard skills scale between these programs if I controlled for all of these variables that we know have something to do with hard skills scale. So if I had a person in the School of Business who was as stimulated, engaged, satisfied, and had good class sizes, and they were equal to a person in SOE on those measures, what happened to the hard skills scale? Well, and the answer is in the bottom. The gap was reduced by over half. So the remaining gap in the hard skills scale, once you control for these factors, is no longer significant. So if our business students perceived that they were as stimulated, engaged, satisfied, and had good class sizes as our ed students, they would be acquiring hard skill scales at a statistically equal rate. Obviously, we push it back, and now it's like, why do the students in the School of Business not feel as stimulated, engaged, and satisfied with instruction? And that's a really, really interesting question, which I will not be addressing here, but I wanted to give you guys. That's
like a fun one.
the most important question, and we will not be discussing that today. But this past Saturday, I think it was Saturday, Scott and I were at the basketball game. We weren't bored by the game. We were waiting for the game to start. So I was on my phone, and I'm going through my phone. I'm reading stuff, and I ran into this opinion piece in the New York Times which Scott has sent to all you guys, because I thought it was fabulous. I want to get this out there. It's an opinion piece. It was published on January 17th, written by David Brooks, and it's called Students Learn from People They Love. Subtitle, Putting Relationship Quality in the Center of Education. And then I also wanted to suggest, if you take the time to go and pull this up and read it, read the comments. I think the comments give such a depth and so many examples of the kinds of experiences that we're having. This is why I am so passionate about class size. You can tell me up one side and down the other that hard student mastery of skills can be achieved in gigantic classes just as easy as it can in small classes. But I don't think the learning is as deep and as meaningful and as long-lasting and as persistent and as transformative as when it's done in a small class where we have the opportunity to build a really good relationship. And I have not said it the way David Brooks said it, but he's saying what's in my heart, which is this idea of the relationship really, really matters. So it's not that our business faculty don't teach as well. We know they teach really well. And we know this because they are accredited, and their accrediting body requires that they do student learning outcomes assessment that is really quite rigorous. We know these students know how to do the things that they are expected to know how to do when they walk out with a degree in marketing, management, or finance. But why aren't they perceiving that they're getting it? And could it possibly be that there is a culture still that persists in the business world, in our universities, that says you're not supposed to love your students? And the fact that there are so many men in these classes, I think that the culture in the classroom may be causing students to feel less emotional about what they're learning and to be driving down some of these measures. So what about these soft skills? David Brooks says you got to have the soft skill thing going in order for the hard skill thing to really get optimized. That's my take on his piece. So I went through the SOS and I pulled out the soft skill measures, and these are the 5 that I am focusing on. How much has SUNY Oswego contributed to skills for personal growth throughout your life, to your openness to the opinions of others, to your understanding and appreciating of ethnic and cultural diversity and other individual differences, to working with others, and to your leadership skills. Again, I packaged it in an additive scale that goes from 5 to 25. Same, I didn't want to have to completely relearn the math in a presentation. So I wanted these scales to be kind of the same kind of thing. The average is a little lower, but doesn't that look really similar? You know, the mode is 20. Lots of people are hitting 4s on lots of stuff. We also have a lot of people giving 5s for everything. 15% of our students are saying that we are contributing the maximum on all 5 of these, which I just think is wonderful. And students take this stuff fairly seriously usually. They're not always pushovers. So doesn't this look similar? It looks similar because students don't really differentiate their learning all that much. And their learning is all happening in one student experience. There are some differences though. Statistically, the gap between business and School of Education is no longer, it's not statistically significant anymore. The pattern is kind of the same though, and all these patterns are the same. One thing that I'll point out here with the soft skill scale, that wasn't so true on the hard skill scale, but if you focus on the upper level bars, which is the second bar in each pairing, so business is about a 19, class is about a 19, SCMA is about a 19, and the School of Education is up not quite 20. When I was looking at this and thinking about it, I was like, okay, so students get there differently. But if we all end up at the same place, does it really matter when the skills are acquired? Is it okay for lower level students to start off at different places? I think if I were middle states coming in, I would say that it's okay. We don't expect them to all walk in thinking, God almighty, thinking that they know how to do everything. And that this parity at the upper level really makes me happy. I like that. The correlations, because I found looking at the correlations with some other items so interesting on the hard skill scales, I did that with this one too. So I pulled out a bunch of items and I said, okay, these are things that correlate with either hard skills or soft skills. Which one do they correlate most highly with? And we've already seen some of this, right? So things that have a higher correlation with hard skills than soft skills are engaging professors, intellectual stimulation, quality of instruction. So all that stuff you learn in the classroom. Faculty respect for students, a big one. And most of these correlations are in 0.4, 0.5. They're fairly strong. Major advising, again, really sort of focusing on learning how to do what I want to do for my major. Oddly, their exposure to cultural programs had a very high correlation with hard skills. I mean, I guess that's good. I would want to poke more into that and see if that carries over into other years because it's kind of an odd thing. Things that correlate higher with soft skills, when the student says, I've had lots of opportunities to practice leadership. I think this campus is very open to the opinions of others. It should be correlated because that's part of the soft skills scale. So when a student says they think the campus is open, they also perceive that they are learning how to function in a world where you have to be open to others' opinions. High correlation between soft skill mastery and access to personal counseling services. For students who answer that question for whom it's important, it's really important. Community service classes. Students who are doing student service in their classes are mastering soft skills. Thank God, and duh, I think that's kind of why we put it there, but it's good.
So it makes a difference they're actually in those classes reflecting upon that.
Yes. Oh my God, you're clairvoyant. You're seeing what's on like one of the next slides. People who say they really like their residence hall programs, that correlates high with soft skills, not so much with hard skills. Community service opportunities. And look at that note in the bottom. If I run a regression and I control for students' ratings on their satisfaction with these experiences, the differences between lower level and upper level disappear, and the differences between the colleges almost disappear. So it isn't what you're majoring in, and it isn't what color you are, and it isn't whether or not you're black, white, or any other racial, ethnic background that drives your mastery of soft skills. It's what you're exposed to. It's what you're doing. Before I get to the graph that you just alluded to, I took a little byway and I went off and I grabbed some data from the NSSE. NSSE is the National Survey of Student Engagement. It has some of the similar kind of learning impact information. The additional value that the NSSE provides is it asks students to self-report, and we actually report also for them, what they're majoring in. One of the big problems with SOS at SUNY Oswego is that class has such a tremendous diversity of majors. Mm-hmm. The learning environment and the construction of the curriculum in the STEM fields is very, very different from the construction of the experiences and the humanities and the social sciences. So being able to separate some of that out, I thought would be useful. And I wanted to see if the NSSE corroborated some of the things that we were seeing. And I particularly wanted to focus on the soft skills. So I created a scale. I found 4 items in the NESI that seemed similarly soft and squishy. They are working effectively with others, clarifying a personal code of values and ethics, understanding people of other backgrounds, and being an informed and active citizen. The field areas, which I grouped, and you can see down at the bottom, kind of small. That first lighter blue are the STEM fields out of class. They have the lowest score on the freshman side for the soft skills. And then next is business. Next is labeled SCMA, but please read the note on the right. In the NESI world, the arts are folded into the social sciences and humanities. Arts and humanities are grouped together. So in this graph, SCMA is only the communications piece. The yellow is education, and including the health and welfare program. I had them separated, but they looked identical, so I squished them back together again. And then the dark blue one is all the class majors that are not STEM majors. So on the freshman side, we have a lot of variance. On the senior side, except in communications, look how even they are. And that's what we saw in that other one. Remember, I was like, look, focus on just the upper level mastery. So if the major gaps are gone by the senior year, maybe the initial gaps don't really matter too much. Maybe that just confirms that curricular experiences unfold differently, which is phenomenal. And the takeaway is we've got to get the right students into the right programs early on so that they can be in the curriculum that unfolds the way their minds are developing. This is the graph that you've already described, which is if you want them, the subtitle of this is, if you want students to learn how to do something, you need to teach them how to do it.
Wow.
I know. My handwritten note on this graph is, duh. But I think this is important. It's important to say, and it's important to study and to understand. So I pulled out 3 perceived gains in learning that are kind of a range. From the hardest of the hard skills, analyzing numerical and statistical information, to 2 of the softer skills, working effectively with others and understanding people of other backgrounds. And this is the terminology out of NESI. These are NESI variables. So we've got first year students and we have seniors. One of the things that's beautiful about the NESI is the NESI asks students to just describe how frequently do you do this in your studies? How frequently do you do this? How frequently have you done this? So I looked at these activities. And then the green correlations are sort of the highest correlation on each row. So a student who says, oh my God, I spend all of my time evaluating what numerical information tells me, that is tremendously, well, not tremendously, but in this world, it's a pretty darn good correlation with, I have mastered analyzing numbers and statistical information. If I do this in my classes, I master that skill. It has nothing to do, or very little to do, with working effectively with others and understanding people of other backgrounds. At the senior level, these correlations are even higher. Have I reached conclusions based on numerical information? Well, it correlates tremendously with the learning outcome related to numeric data. It has nothing to do with working effectively with others. Okay, jump down to the next 2. Explaining course material to another student and working with other students on course projects or assignments. This second one here, this working with other students, this is teamwork. Teamwork and explaining material to other students is really nicely correlated with working effectively with others. If we want to graduate students who can work effectively with others, learning how to do really effective teamwork projects that don't completely piss students off is a great way to learn. I mean, that's a great way to reach that outcome. These are solid correlations. Explaining things to other students doesn't help you analyze numbers. It also doesn't help you hardly at all in understanding people of other backgrounds. We cannot assume that just shoving them on a team together is going to teach students how to work well with students who come from backgrounds different from their own. It would be a beautiful thing if it worked that way. But we all know from Facebook, you get on Facebook and everything you see is from all of your friends, and it's really hard to dig and find the stuff that comes from people who don't feel like you, or this is not a great analogy. I'm going to leave it now. Okay, so the last two there, what does giving a course presentation do? Well, not much of anything, frankly, along these. It does correlate fairly well in the senior year with working effectively with others. You are learning some about communicating. If we want people to understand the experiences of people from other backgrounds, and understanding is the basis of optimizing productivity in a team environment, working with people from other backgrounds, we've got to have them do that in their courses and in their curriculum. Including diverse perspectives in course discussions and assignments has a strong correlation with students saying, yeah, I'm learning about that. So if we want students to have that learning outcome, those kinds of learning experiences have to be embedded into the curriculum. And I'm done, which is good because we need to be done. I think I did have a slide here where we were going to talk about these things, teaching these things. I don't think we really have much time for that. I don't have to run. If any of you do have comments or questions, do we need to be out of the room by 4?
No. I was just looking to see if anyone online wants to jump in, either turn your microphones back on and say something or type something into chat.
I just want to say I really see the hard skills in the art students, and that over the past 2 years, I have these art students who are very creative and want to paint new art. They come in and they're like, I hate this drawing class, or I hate this
Picture my
design concepts course, and I have to do all this cutting and very technical things.
Yes.
And then as they progress, they get more free with their, cool art courses that they take. But I
Yes.
can totally see those hard skills.
That, when I saw that, and when Scott and I were talking about it, I don't know that much about how Oswego's curriculum in the arts and theater and music plays out. But I know a lot about how it was structured at Green Bay, because my own kids were really involved with a lot of that, so they got to know a lot of those teachers, and so I got to know the teachers. Plus, those accrediting groups, the National Music in SM, Art, Music, and Theater are accredited, and the accrediting bodies have a lot to do with what the curriculum has to include and how much of it and how many labs, and so there are a lot of similarities. And it was interesting when I was presenting this, and I said, I think their curriculum sometimes almost is flipped. I saw you nodding, and I was like, oh, she either knows a lot about the curriculum here, or
As they
I thought
advance,
it was confirming what I was seeing.
As they advance, they have a lot more freedom in what they get to take, and they can repeat, some courses multiple times that are more crafty. But at the beginning, it's very structured, and you need to take these to make sure you have the foundation to be able to be successful in the art courses. And I hear the students come in all the time. If I have to look and draw another box, I'm going to lose my mind.
Yeah, and by the upper level, as we go to, particularly in fine arts, go to the senior shows, and it's clear that what's happening in those last years is students connecting those skills and techniques into actually making a statement about the world, which is the soft skill representation. So I can see that students actually would master a lot of that and really feel like they're getting this hard stuff crammed down their throat. And that by the end, it's much more about what does it all mean? So I can throw a pot. How is my pot representative of the evolution of ceramics and pottery and what that's meant, how the evolution of that technology has evolved as the world has evolved. So,
Debbie, can you go back to the previous, I think it was the last slide. So
correlations.
I'm stuck on presentation, like the 0.01 on the analyzing numerical.
Yep.
I think there's a misunderstanding. I mean, if I had to articulate this, I can't imagine doing a presentation that doesn't have analysis in it. I can't. So, and like your presentation just now.
Yep.
The actual act of delivery, maybe not, but definitely the act of preparing it. So, we're asking you to do more and more. We are trying to engage you in all of those things, especially if it's in a group project or working with other people and so on. And boy, the 0.01 really gets to me in lower and upper level classes.
For freshmen, it's probably not as surprising, but for upper level, that's
for them to think that it's, well, yeah, if you, the act of blurting it out, maybe, but the act of preparing for it, how could that not require significant? Or what are we asking you to do? Wave your hand? I mean, that's not what we're asking you to do.
I think that what we're seeing is maybe how students are interpreting what these questions mean.
some of it could be framing, or within the classroom.
So when we ask a student, when Nessie asked the student, how much has your experience contributed to your ability to analyze numerical and statistical information? Yeah, but I agree that the correlation it's crazy low. Although,
Yeah.
I mean, this is the criticism of, I mean, out in the world of business, this is the brilliant man that nobody wants on their team because, I shouldn't say man, the brilliant person.
Probably open.
Yes. Oh, yeah, so-and-so is brilliant, but, you don't want him on your team. She gets off track. She never gets the work done. She can't communicate anything. She's so brilliant and no one else understands how she does it or what she does. It's sort of, 20 years ago, people say, well, engineers. And it's like, oh, well, my husband's an engineer. And that would say it all. Oh, he's clueless about my feelings and my emotions. And
left brain okay.
Yes,
right brain
yes,
nothing.
right. He doesn't even really recognize, the difference between dogs, cats, and humans. So diverse perspectives. What is our diverse perspective? A 3 is a 3 to everybody. A 4 is a 4 to everybody.
So what I was thinking was, in the context of soft skills, one of the things, I know I spent a lot of time in computer science, perhaps changing the culture of our students, was that, they would speak to a normal person, and by normal, I mean somebody who's not a coder. And they would use the same language they used that they would use with me in explaining their work.
Yep.
Where half of the words they use, nobody knows what it is. So it clearly was totally useless. And if you're trying to present to people who are hiring you, paying your salary, or people that are going to contract with you for you to develop something for, you're not going to get anywhere because they just have no idea what you just said. So the ability to present at the right level to the right audience is a critical skill if you're going to go anywhere in a field like computer science, which you would think that perhaps is one of those where the hard skills win.
Yes.
But you can only go so far if you're in a cubicle in a corner and nobody wants to talk to you. So I think it's always been important to me in that discipline to get students to think of themselves as different than people who code.
One of the things I'm thinking about listening to you about 100,000 years ago, I was involved in a project that really focused on mentoring. And the person who brought the project to the table and was really trying to push it wasn't focusing on mentoring for the sake of the person being mentored. This person was really coming from the perspective of you don't truly know something until you can teach it to somebody else. And I was just thinking of that listening to you, Ramin, that many of our advanced math and STEM students have wonderful, wonderful skills. And, you know, getting them into the tutoring lab, working with students, even if it's just a little bit, you know, teaching something very basic would be better. You know, I mean, it's useful for the people getting tutored, but it would also be very, very good for the students who are getting ready to walk out the door, hoping to teach people how to make decisions based on the work that they're doing. On the other hand, you know, kids who go to a tutoring lab are there because they need help, and to, you know, to hand them off to somebody who may not have an aptitude for teaching is not good either. But
so the first time I read the lab book, I wrote the sentence like, point to this button and click on it.
Yeah.
So, and I'm in the lab with my students running the lab, and I'm observing. One of the adult students in the class picks up the mouse and points at the screen, and I'm trying to figure out, what are you doing? I mean, literally, she has the mouse in her hand.
Oh my God.
And I'm not understanding.
yeah,
Right? I have no idea what's going on. So I go over, is there something wrong? I said, well, the instruction said,
yeah,
point to the
yeah.
button and click. And I keep doing it and nothing happens. So I changed the instruction
Yeah.
in the next version.
So that could be a really interesting thing to do, and not with introductory math and science, but with 200 and 300 level, to have an assignment where they either have to write documentation or do a video documentation where they are literally communicating how to do something.
So we do a
write
peanut
out
butter.
peanut butter and jelly instructions, and then they have to make it based on how they
Yeah,
wrote the instructions. So if they don't say put the knife into the peanut butter, they've got to find a way to scoop the peanut butter without the knife.
Or like open up the jar and then take a knife
You
and
make
stab
these
it.
mental leaps about this step, and
yeah,
and it's only because we know too much, and whatever the topic.
Cursive knowledge. That's referred.
So I think the students having the opportunities to have those small experiences ends up paying significant dividends later on. That, you know, depending on who your audience is, you may be wasting their time, and obviously if you're trying to get a job or make a deal or whatever, wasting yours. So presentation thing, I'm still going to think about
yeah. I'm going to think more about it too.
that number that.
Yeah. Well, and because so many of these things are highly correlated with each other, you know.
Yeah.
Happy kids who are doing a whole bunch of stuff and learning a whole bunch of stuff are pretty much high score across the board. But the diverse perspectives thing, that one doesn't surprise me. Yeah, giving course presentation.
I think that would help with communication skills, but
Yes. If I pulled out,
other.
it would be really, really high, I think, on speaking, which is one of the measures, but I can pick that one up. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming and listening to me and learning what I've learned.